Our soulful encounter is always just between us on 938 Live.
Great to have you on Between Us and 938 Live. I'm Angela Lim on the show that explores relationship issues and shares inspiring stories from our everyday heroes. Now, today we're talking a little bit more about marriage after having children. Whether you just had your child, young children, or whether your children has grown up and left the house, we're going to find out more about some tips to keep the romance alive and also to strengthen your marriage with my guest today, who's marriage specialist from Focus on the Family, Elvira Tan. Elvira, great to have you on the show today. Let's talk a little bit about marriage after children because, you know, things are great for a while, especially after you just get married and then you have time for each other. It's like the honeymoon period. When you have a child, especially when you just give birth, for example, what changes in the marriage dynamic?
Two huge changes occur when a baby comes along. First thing that happens, suddenly you wonder where all your energy has gone and there doesn't seem to be any more time to just be together with your spouse because baby just takes up so much time.
In a way, it's about priorities, isn't it? Because, you know, when you have, for example, a new child in the family, then of course all the attention goes to tending to what the child needs. So some would say it's normal that I take attention away from my spouse. Is that necessarily true?
Well, it is inevitable. So it's all about learning how to manage that, not letting baby take over everything entirely, coming up with your own coping mechanisms as to how you and your husband are going to navigate through these new waters.
Well, I guess let's talk about it in terms of what dads can do, what moms can do sometimes, because I guess the roles might be slightly different depending on each family. If you're a mom and, you know, you have to, in a way, take care of the child at the start and you're feeling like, yeah, I'm not really in the mood to go out, I'm not in the mood to go for a date night, for example, or to be intimate with my husband because I just have no more energy and no more time.
Yes.
What are some ways you can kind of create the environment or the energy and time?
Well, one thing that I really wanted to bring out is the first thing that comes to mind would be the importance of communication. So it takes a lot of discipline. You have to start communicating with each other and not just relying on feelings. True, like you said, you might not feel like going out on a date or even being intimate. But just taking out some time to just talk it through with your husband creates a platform for you to make sure that you get your relationship on the right track. Because one of the first things that my husband and I decided on set when baby came along was that we really still needed to put the marriage top priority because we're not going to be any good to our kids if we're constantly fighting, if we can't even stand being around each other. So it's a very tricky thing when you just rely on feelings and let situations just sweep you off your feet and don't allow the situation to just take over and take charge with your husband. So that's why I'm here today to hopefully be able to share a little bit more about what to anticipate if you are going to have a baby, or if you've already had a baby, what you can do to reset things and get it on the right track.
In the first place, it might not occur to many of us that we need to start thinking and planning to have time together as a couple just because there's just so much to do and not enough time to do it. In the case where, could it be also that sometimes when you become parents, you start taking the role of mummy and daddy, and then you don't see each other, in the same way anymore? Because sometimes when I guess a wife refers to her husband as daddy to the child, eventually you start getting typecasted into those roles and you see each other as a partner in caring for your child, not necessarily as your spouse or someone you love.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I had a conversation with my husband about this when our baby first came, and I was saying, I would appreciate it if sometimes you didn't call me mommy and you called me by my name, because I still, I felt that it was important for us to still look at each other in our own individual strengths, why we fell in love with each other, to remember what we're all about. We're not just mommy or just daddy when the baby comes along. I think calling each other by each other's names is a good reminder that we're still we're still very, very unique individuals. We still bring to the marriage all our strengths, all our weaknesses, and we need to remember to enjoy each other's company as partners in life, and not just playing out the role of being a parent to our children.
In some way, also, when you treat each other with some kind of love, and affection, your children also pick up on that pretty easily. If you forget to be mindful about it, then sometimes, the stresses will take over. And then you start getting irritable, you start getting angry, and again, the kids pick up on that. How important is it that we show the children as well that there's still love, there's still romance between the couple?
I think, which is why from the very beginning, it's very important. The minute the baby comes, you sit down and spend some time talking about how you're going to deal with it. So certain things that, that come to mind would be that the two of you as husband and wife, as a couple, my husband and I became very selective about, the outside commitments that we made. We had to cut down on a lot of things when baby comes. My husband can't go out with his guy friends all that much.
Oh, no night out with a guy.
Yeah. And I can't go off and, have tea with friends. I mean, these are adjustments that we have to make. But just to remind each other that it's not the all and end all. Life doesn't have to be that way, for all time. It's a temporary thing. There are certain expectations that have to be adjusted. So, your usual me time that you have, yes, that has to go. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just being more intentional about what you do with your time.
And speaking of which, we're going to explore a little bit more, maybe with some examples of cases that you've actually been through as well, Elvira, and how to manage time a bit better, because listeners are scratching their heads now and going, yeah, I have no idea how we're going to create this time magically out of our busy schedules.
Tips. I'll be ready to share with you.
We're looking forward to that in just a bit. Chatting today with my guest, Elvira Tan, who's marriage specialist from Focus on the Family. Today we're talking about marriage and romance after having children. Stay tuned for more here on Between Us.
Man is a knot into which relationships are tied, but nothing comes between us. On 938 Live. Reset your relationships in Between Us.
Thanks for staying tuned to Between Us here at 938 Live, chatting with Elvira Tan, marriage specialist from Focus on the Family. Today we're talking about marriage and romance after children. And Elvira, we started by talking about the need to prioritize the relationship, first of all. The big question now is, how in all these busy schedules with having a kid, how do we create time from what seems like nothing?
Well, if you've just had baby, the top tip that comes to mind would be, to just be open to accepting help. A lot of us women, we tend to want to do it all, and we feel like a cop out if we're not super mom, if we can't handle it all. But it's actually a clever thing to just, swallow a little bit of your pride and just accept that even if I can't do it all, why should I have to do it all? And list the help of others to help you out with baby so that you can focus more time on your relationship with your spouse. Because you asked me, how do we create time for ourselves? One way is to get help.
There's also an element of, the mother's guilt, right? You feel like, maybe I should be doing this for the child. But if you look at it in the long term, if you're sapping your energy, you're unhappy, you're angry all the time, it's really not doing your child any benefit at all. Anyway,
it's about being selective. So you pick important responsibilities and duties and caregiving duties that you know that no one can replace you for. Other things like doing the laundry, cleaning the home, washing babies' diapers and stuff like clothing. Those things can be farmed out. You don't have to do it all. And once in a while, just taking time off to go out with your spouse, 2 hours, having the baby with your mom is not going to, absolutely ruin you as a mother. Nobody's going to pass judgment on you if you just take some time off, because it's a clever thing to spend time with your spouse. You'll be a better mother for it.
In some way, I guess it might be difficult for people to allow themselves that, that night off sometimes, so almost as though we feel that if we do go out, then we should be spending time with that child. So what are some things that you do in your personal time, or when you manage to create that time? What do you and your husband do?
Well, it is a struggle, I have to admit. Guilty feelings are part and parcel of when you have a baby and when you're going out, you wonder, am I being too indulgent? Am I putting myself above the child? But really, if you keep reminding yourself that by taking care of my relationship with my husband, I'm actually showing love to my child as well. Because if I don't have a strong relationship with my husband, if I'm not connecting with my husband, we're not going to be on the same page about being good parents to our child. That time alone, how you spend it with your spouse, you can use it to talk about definitely where your love is at with each other, how you're relating to each other. And then if it assuages your guilt, for me, I do fit in some time talking about how we can be better parents, how we want to align, how do we get ourselves to be on the same page to be good parents to our kid. That helps me assuage my guilt a little bit.
Right. Do we want to avoid things like the mundane things like, oh, okay, who's going to pick the child up tomorrow? Who's going to do the dishes? Do we want to talk about these things? Is it helpful sometimes?
Well, it's best not to on date night, but
Kind of kills the romance.
it kind of kills the romance, but it helps, which brings me to my next point. It helps to have a lot of humor in a relationship. So even mundane conversations like that, you can weave it in as long as you have a sense of humor. Take it with a lighthearted approach.
Yeah, don't get stressed out
It doesn't
about
have to
it.
get so intense, you know. It doesn't mean your friendship with your husband goes out the window the minute you have a baby. Yes.
Interesting. So the idea of being friends again, you want to be able to establish that level of connection and companionship you used to have before the child. We're going to talk a bit more about as children are growing up, and also when your children leave the home as well, how to reignite that romance and the affection you have for each other as a couple. Elvira Tan is my guest today. She's not only talking from the perspective as marriage specialist with focus on the family, she's also a mother of two, age 2 and 9. She's going to share more about marriage after having children. If you'd like to weigh in as well and share your personal experiences and tips, call us on this number, 669 11938. We'll continue after headline news and sports. Stay tuned.
It's always just between us, all right? Reset your relationships in Between Us.
Chatting today about marriage after children and how to keep the spark alive with Elvira Tan, my guest from Focus on the Family. She's a marriage specialist. And Elvira is also a mom of two children, age 2 and 9 years old. So Elvira comes from a place of experience as well. Elvira, tell us a bit more about the idea of kind of redefining romance and intimacy, because especially after you just have kids, the ideas of intimacy and what you think romance is has to also change with your circumstance. So talk to us a bit about this.
Well, for one thing, you never know who's going to spring up on you when you just want to get intimate with your spouse. So it takes it's a bit challenging. It takes a little bit of planning. Sometimes a little bit of spontaneity as well would be helpful. But intimacy and romance does have to be redefined a little once the kids come along. You have to find new ways to stay connected physically. You might find yourselves wanting or needing to touch each other in non-sexual ways, to cuddle up and be intimate. You can't always just head to the bed and have, the kind of sexual relationship that you used to have, but it can still be just as good. It's about, being creative and reminding each other that this time will pass. It's not going to be that way forever. You can have that mind-blowing lovemaking you've had, that you enjoyed before the kids came along.
I guess it's important not to feel like, that's the end of the marriage and everything's going down the hill. Let's talk a bit about, I guess, different perspectives of the males and the females. I'm looking at women who've just given birth. It's really not the best place in terms of the hormones that are raging. Also, sometimes you're busy with the kid, and more importantly, also sometimes you don't want to be intimate because you don't feel very comfortable with your body post-pregnancy with all the changes. So what are some things that, I guess the husbands can do to kind of encourage them to feel better, and then that might create some desire for intimacy?
Yeah, so that's why I was sharing, how the lovemaking might be a bit different. It's really referring to just the initial months when baby has just arrived. A lot of us women, after giving birth, we don't exactly feel very attractive, and we are in the nurturing mode. We're lactating, we're breastfeeding. Sometimes we feel like complete cow. So it's very difficult to get us into that mode. Yeah. So as wives, we do ask for a little patience from the husbands. It would really help if you could, still try to help make us feel attractive. Yes, we might have put on some weight. It would help to say something like, hey, I do like those new curves that you have on you. It would make our day, maybe get us into the mood. But wives as well, I think we do have to make the effort to know that we just don't, forget about it, forget about our spouse. When the baby comes, we still do need to make the effort. Do take care of your appearance. It will make you feel better as well, and it'll help your husband too. Remember that you are not just a mom; you are still his wife. And you can continue to have that relationship you've always had even before baby came.
I mean, sometimes it's easy to slip into that sort of that mode where you're thinking, I'm already doing all these things for the kid, for you, and then what, cooking, cleaning, and then what else do you expect? And then you feel a little bit frustrated both ways, right? The husband's frustrated at the fact that wife doesn't want to come near him anymore, and the wife feels angry at the fact that there's expectations. So it's really about communicating what each of you need.
Yes, which is why granted, all these tips would be very difficult if you're already in a very emotionally fragile place or you're feeling disconnected from your spouse. Asking you to do these things, to doll yourself up, to make the effort for your husband, and for husbands to be patient, I know that sounds like a pretty tall order, which is why it is so important that before baby comes along, if you haven't had baby yet, it's so important to get your foundation right. So if you're a newlywed, go read up, marriage enrichment resources, hone your communication skills, get your conflict resolution skills right, pat down, attend workshops, at Focus on the Family, we do have something we call the Marriage Builder Program. You can take an online assessment, and a trained counselor will take you through the results, find out what your strengths are, work on what you need to work on, and equip you with the skills. So even if you have had a baby and you're not truly happy with where your relationship is at, it's never too late to do the reset button, to set the reset button and get things right. I know that, some of the tips shared, like I said, it will not come naturally if you don't get your foundation right. If you're already feeling a little bit of animosity towards your spouse, asking you to do these things would be difficult.
Yeah, of course. It would be very challenging to kind of take yourself out of that anger and frustration and say, I'm going to do something nice for you. For many couples who feel that, they are in a challenging position, they're fighting all the time over the children, what are some things you would suggest? I mean, apart from reading up, finding out more, what else would you say would be helpful?
Try to remember why you fell in love with it in the first place. Maybe revisit places that you went to as a courting couple when you were dating. Do the things that you both loved before, and try and recollect memorable experiences in your conversations. Try not to be so transactional. It was a very good thing that you brought up just now, how conversations shouldn't just revolve around the children, like who's going to pick up which child, and what are we going to do for the child minding situation on the weekend. It's a lot more than that, and it's so important that couples really make the effort to spend some time together, to just focus on each other and to have fun with each other.
We're going to find out more about how to communicate appreciation. I think it's quite important. How to communicate the love and the affection that all of us started off with in our relationships. Yes. We're going to find out more from Elvira today, who is a marriage specialist for Focus on the Family, and she's talking today about marriage after children. Stay tuned.
It's always just between us, all right? Our soulful encounter is always just between us on 938 Live.
Moving into our final segment here on Between Us and 938 Live, chatting so far about romance and marriage after having children. My guest today is Elvira Tan, marriage specialist for Focus on Family. Elvira, you talked earlier about, how sometimes it's about just showing appreciation, communicating the love, or kind of remembering why you loved each other in the first place. Tell us a bit more about some specific ways we can start showing appreciation to our spouse, for our listeners who are tuning in now.
Well, it doesn't really have to take a lot of time and effort. Just remember to kiss each other goodbye every day in the morning when the spouse is going off to work. Hug each other as you leave or when you return home. Sitting together, holding hands, watching TV. These little connection times can make a difference. And really speaking your spouse's love language, finding out what really makes them feel loved, be it physical touch, giving gifts, spending quality time. All those things would really really, really help.
For couples tuning in now who are, I guess, a lot older, maybe approaching retirement, and the children are pretty much grown up and left the house, what are some things they can do? I mean, especially if you're feeling a little out of touch in terms of things to do that are romantic or dating ideas. Are there ways they can kind of get into the groove of things again?
It's funny you asked that question because my parents just returned from a cruise. They're in their 60s, and sometimes you do run out of novel ideas or creative ways to get romantic with each other. So I guess trapping themselves on a ship for 4 days helped a lot. They had a lot of fun from what I hear from them. And I think being away from the rest of us, the kids, the grandkids, being on that ship or going on a vacation together on trips and just focusing on each other and talking. And if there are gaps where, if you happen to run out of topics to talk about, the activities like learning to dance, go for ballroom dancing classes with your spouse, gives you opportunities to touch each other, to just be intimate with each other, and all the kinds of activities that you have on cruise ships. I think that creates lots of opportunities for fun and romance.
Perhaps another idea would also be, if you're finding it difficult to be spontaneous with each other, start indulging in outside activities, have mutual friends, I suppose, that you can do things together with, that builds on that relationship as well.
A lot of senior citizens, they do have a very tight group of friends. Some of them have been friends they have grown up with. It helps to go on double dates, triple dates, group dates, and then they reminisce about the times that they used to spend, as couples in their youth, and that can bring back a lot of good memories for them as well. So, and seeing how other couples relate to each other sometimes can be inspiring for, other couples. So it's all a community thing. Everyone just encourages each other in their growth in their marriage.
Yeah, I guess the effort to stay connected and the desire to want to make it work, I think, will kind of make sure that things fall into place. As long as both of you want it badly enough, that marriage will still work out. If you want to find out more, as Elvira was saying, you want to find out more resources, more workshop ideas, and also a little bit more material you might want to read up on, and not just on how to be a good parent, but also how to stay connected with your spouse. You can head on down to Focus on the Family's website. It's www.family.org.sg for more information. www.family.org.sg. Elvira Tan has been my guest today. She's marriage specialist for Focus on the Family, sharing about marriage after children. Elvira, it's been such a pleasure.
Thanks.
Man is a knot into which relationships are tied, but nothing comes between us. On 938 Live.